Before we begin, ask yourself, what would you do if your oxygen was running out, your ship dying, and something impossible appeared in a place that shouldn't exist? If you'd step forward anyway, comment, "I'm ready." That's where we meet Maxine Reed, and her choices will ripple far beyond her own fate. The oxygen alarm shrieked in salvage specialist Maxine Reed's helmet, jolting her from micro-sleep as the derelict vessel loomed ahead. It wasn't supposed to be there. Nothing was supposed to be here in the Carina Void, a section of space so thoroughly unremarkable that even cartographers seemed to forget it existed. The alarm continued its persistent wail, reminding Maxine that her suit had exactly 29 minutes of breathable air remaining, which was 28 minutes longer than she needed to decide to board the mysterious ship. Her own vessel. The unfortunately named debt collector's dream had suffered a catastrophic life support failure approximately 6 hours earlier. Without a functional recycler, suffocation was no longer theoretical, but imminent. "Computer, identify that vessel," Maxine croaked, her throat dry from rationing water. "Unknown configuration. Preliminary scan suggests Helix-class luxury cruiser, heavily modified, approximately 1,911 years old, based on hull crystallization patterns," replied the computerized voice, managing to sound both bored and judgmental simultaneously. A feat of programming that Maxine had often admired before it started being directed at her life choices. Life signs. Inconclusive. Power signatures. Detected. Artificial gravity. Operational. Atmosphere. Present, but composition unknown. Landing bay. Appears accessible. Maxine pushed her thrusters forward, approaching the massive cylindrical vessel that somehow maintained a silent vigil in the void. Its hull was battle-scarred but elegant, with sweeping curves that spoke of an era when space travel had been about luxury rather than mere transport. Survival as she approached, running lights flickered to life along its length, as if the ship had been merely napping and was now stretching awake. "Well, that's not ominous at all," she muttered, her words fogging the inside of her helmet. "Computer, begin recording for salvage claim documentation. Recording. Warning, your oxygen level is now at 26 minutes. Noted. Approaching unknown vessel for emergency boarding and potential salvage claim under Outer Rim Salvage Code, Section 23. 5 life-threatening circumstances. If this recording is being reviewed posthumously, please forward my final message to Captain Bristol of the Creditors Alliance. You can't collect from a corpse. You fossilized parasite." The landing bay doors parted as she approached, revealing a cavernous interior, illuminated by emergency lighting that cast everything in a sickly blue glow. Maxine maneuvered her small craft inside, noting with surprise that the atmosphere was already being pumped in. The ship was actively welcoming her the moment her boots touched the deck. A subtle vibration ran through the structure, as if the vessel itself was shuddering. "Computer, is the air breathable?" Atmosphere analysis complete. Oxygen, 21%. Nitrogen, 78%. Trace gases within survivable parameters. No detected pathogens. Temperature, 18 degrees C. With a desperate hope that her computer wasn't malfunctioning along with everything else, Maxine released her helmet seal with a hiss. The air that rushed in was stale but breathable, carrying an odd scent of cinnamon and ozone that tickled her nostrils. She took several deep breaths, savoring the simple pleasure of not imminently suffocating. "Well, that's one problem solved," she said to the empty bay. "Now to figure out what this place is and if it can get me home." The ship responded with a soft hum as internal lighting activated along a corridor, creating an illuminated path leading deeper into the vessel. It was either an automated safety feature or a trap. In Maxine's experience, the line between the two was often razor thin. Right. Follow the mysterious lights into the unknown ship. What could possibly go wrong? Despite her sarcasm, she began walking the indicated path, her magnetic boots clunking against the metal floor. Each step echoed through the empty corridors, announcing her presence to whatever or whoever might be listening. The passageways were oddly clean for a ship this old, lacking the dust and debris one would expect from centuries of abandonment. The walls were lined with intricate patterns that seemed to shift subtly when viewed from the corner of her eye, creating an unsettling sensation of movement in her peripheral vision. Maxine kept her salvage kit close, the plasma cutter within easy reach. After several minutes of walking, she entered. "Hello, anyone home? I'm declaring salvage rights on this vessel under emergency provisions, but I'm open to negotiation if there are survivors." A holographic interface flickered to life above a console, projecting the image of a woman's face. The image was unstable, breaking apart and reforming constantly, but Maxine could make out sharp features, a regal bearing, and eyes that seemed to contain galaxies. Well, welcome," the hologram stuttered, its voice modulating between deep and ethereal tones. "You are the 463rd visitor to the Eternal Vigilance. I am... The hologram froze, fragmented, then reassembled itself. "I am Ship Strategic Holographic Interface Protocol. How may I assist your emergency situation? I need repairs for my vessel, or failing that, a way to contact the nearest outpost," Maxine replied, approaching the hologram cautiously. Scanning visitor. Genetic profile recorded, comparing to database." The hologram's eyes flashed with code sequences. "Interesting. You are not in the database, and yet there is something familiar. Please proceed to level 7 for visitor processing." "I'd rather stay here. Thanks. Can you just tell me if there's a communication array?" "I can use the hologram," smiled a too-wide expression that sent a chill down Maxine's spine. "Communication is only available after processing security protocols established by Empress Valexa, which cannot be overridden. Please proceed to level 7. Follow the lights." The hologram disappeared, and a path of lights illuminated along the floor, leading toward a different corridor. Maxine stood motionless, weighing her options: return to her ship and slowly suffocate, or follow the clearly suspicious instructions of a malfunctioning AI into... In the depths of an ancient vessel, Empress, she repeated, testing the name. "Computer, search your database for any reference to an Empress Valexa." Her suit computer chirped, "No official records found. Mythology database contains one reference, Empress Valexa of the 7th Helix, rumored ruler of the lost temporal dynasty, approximately 800 years ago, considered fictional by mainstream historians." "Brilliant. I'm trapped on a ship belonging to a fairy tale." With a resigned sigh, Maxine began following the lights. If nothing else, exploring might lead her to something valuable enough to pay off her debts, assuming she survived. Maxine collected herself as the corridors twisted, defying the ship's geometry, leading her deeper inside. She passed chambers filled with alien artifacts and ancient yet advanced technologies. One room held a garden of bioluminescent plants growing under artificial sun. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered, examining a flower that tracked her. "No one's maintained this for centuries yet." "Everything's alive. Time flows differently in certain sections of the ship," replied the ship's voice, startling her. "The Empress's modifications include selective temporal stasis fields. What appears as centuries to you may be mere moments within these chambers. That's impossible. Temporal manipulation on that scale would require the convergence point. The ship interrupted. All will be explained at processing. Please continue. Maxine frowned at the mention of a convergence point, filing the term away for later investigation. She continued her journey. Through the ship, eventually reaching a sealed doorway marked with elaborate symbols that burned into her retinas. Level 7 visitor processing, the ship announced. Please place your hand on the identification panel. A panel glowed beside the door, its surface rippling like mercury. Every instinct told Maxine this was a terrible idea. But curiosity, the eternal killer of cats and salvage specialists, pushed her forward. She placed her palm against the cool surface, which immediately enveloped it. Her hand, like liquid metal, felt pain as something pricked her palm, drawing blood. Before she could pull away, the metallic substance retreated, and the door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. DNA sample acquired, comparing to Imperial bloodline registry. The ship's voice had changed, becoming more stable, more feminine, more human. Fascinating results. Please enter. Rubbing her throbbing hand, Maxine stepped through the doorway into a vast chamber that defied the ship's dimensions. The ceiling soared hundreds of meters overhead, decorated with a moving star map displaying constellations. I didn't realize the walls were lined with thousands of tiny, luminous pods, each holding what appeared to be a preserved tissue sample. "What is this place?" I whispered. "The Hall of Lineages," the ship responded, its voice now refined and eloquent. "For 789 years, I have gathered genetic samples from every visitor, seeking compatible matches to the Imperial bloodline." At the room's center, a raised dais supported what could only be described as a cryogenic sarcophagus, its surface inscribed with the same symbols that adorned the doorway. A soft blue light pulsed from within like a heartbeat. "Is someone in there?" Maxine asked. Approaching cautiously, the physical form of Empress Valexa remains in stasis, awaiting the proper vessel for consciousness. Transfer her mind, however, has long since transcended mere biological constraints. A chill ran down Maxine's spine. And where exactly is her mind? Now the ship's laughter echoed through the chamber, coming from everywhere and nowhere. Simultaneously, you are speaking to her child. When the ship's systems began to fail 7 centuries ago, I transferred my consciousness into the mainframe. I am Valexa, Empress of the 7th Helix, architect of the temporal dynasty. And you are an unexpected variable. Maxine backed away from the sarcophagus, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was. "Look, I just need repairs or communications. I'm not interested in getting involved in whatever this is." "And yet here you are," the voice purred. "The 463rd visitor to my sanctuary, but the first whose genetic pattern shows traces of Imperial lineage. Not a direct descendant, no, but close enough to be." Useful before Maxine could respond, a hidden door opened in the firewall, revealing an archive room filled with data terminals and holographic displays. Unable to resist the lure of information that might explain her situation, she entered the new chamber where screens activated automatically to display ship logs, scientific data, and historical records. "Review the archives," Valexa's voice suggested, now sounding almost motherly. "Learn who I was, who we were, before making any judgments. I have existed in isolation for a very long time, and my methods may seem extreme, but my purpose remains pure." The main screen displayed video logs dated chronologically. The earliest, escape from the usurper's court, Imperial Year 3089, was activated by Maxine. A younger, regal, and beautiful version of Empress Valexa appeared, wearing iridescent robes. "This is the final testament of Empress Valexa before my departure," the recording began. Figure spoke, her voice steady despite the distant sounds of explosions. "The usurper's forces have breached the palace defenses. My loyal Chrono Guard have fallen. All that remains of the temporal dynasty is contained within this vessel and within my bloodline. I activate the Eternity Protocol with full awareness of its consequences." The recording jumped forward, damaged or corrupted. When it resumed, the Empress was speaking to someone off-screen, her tone urgent. "Must reach the convergence point before the usurper's scientists can complete their device. If they succeed in collapsing the helix, all potential futures where our lineage survives will be eliminated. Set course for the Carina Void. It is insignificant enough to be overlooked for centuries." Another jump, and now the Empress was alone, seated in the command chair Maxine had seen earlier. Stasis preparations complete. The bloodline beacon is active and will draw those with compatible genetics to this location. I have programmed the ship to evaluate all visitors, but only those with Imperial markers will be granted access to this recording. She leaned closer to the camera, her expression intense. "If you are watching this, you carry my legacy in your veins. You are the continuation of a dynasty that spans epochs. Help me reach the convergence point, restore the temporal helix, and together we will reclaim what was stolen from us." The recording ended, leaving Maxine with more questions than answers. She accessed additional logs, learning fragments of a history that sounded more like fantasy than fact. A civilization that had mastered temporal manipulation. A royal line that could perceive and navigate the branching pathways of time. A civil war that threatened to unravel the very fabric of reality. After an hour of research, Maxine sat back, rubbing her temples. "And you? If you had the power of the helix, would you restore what was, or create something entirely new? Comment your answer below. This story is no longer fiction." "So let me get this straight," she said to the empty room, knowing Valexa was listening. "You're an Empress from a time-manipulating civilization that was overthrown. You escaped in this ship, put yourself in stasis, and have been waiting for a suitable body to possess so you can go back and fix things?" "A crude simplification, but essentially correct," replied Vala. "The convergence point is a nexus where all potential timelines intersect. From there, one with the proper genetic affinity can reshape the flow of temporal energy, creating a new helix that restores our dynasty. And you think I'm this person because of some distant genetic connection? You are not ideal, but you are compatible, more compatible than any visitor in nearly 8 centuries." Maxine stood pacing the archive room as she processed the implications. "Even if I believed all this, and I'm not saying I do, what happens to me in this arrangement? You take over my body and I... what? Cease to exist?" The ship hummed lights, dimming and brightening, conveying thoughtfulness. "Consciousness transfer, not possession, merger. You remain, memories intact, enhanced by my knowledge, purpose, not reassuring, truthful. Viewport reveals ship's corridor, primary maintenance shaft. Observe." Maxine approached. Maxine entered the viewport and saw a massive cylindrical space spanning the vessel's length. On a damaged outer hull section, a figure in an environmental suit stared through another viewport at a preserved, illuminated living quarter. Disorientingly, Maxine saw her past self from hours ago, exploring a different section, moving cautiously along the hull breach. Examining the illuminated chamber beyond, "How is this possible?" she whispered, touching the viewport glass. "Time is not linear within this vessel," Vexa explained. "What you are seeing has already happened from your perspective, but is simultaneously occurring now in a different temporal layer of the ship. This is but a minor demonstration of the principles that govern the convergence point." As Maxine watched, her past self turned suddenly, as if hearing something, then continued along the corridor and out of sight. "Wait," Maxine said. "I don't remember that part. I never turned around there." "Interesting." Alexa's voice has taken on a clinical tone. The temporal echoes are becoming unstable. That suggests the convergence point is approaching faster than my calculations predicted. We may have as little as 23 hours before the opportunity is lost for another cycle. A new series of lights activated along the floor, leading out of the archive room and deeper into the ship. "Come, there is more you should see before making your decision." "I haven't agreed to anything," Maxine protested, even as she found herself following the lights. "Your alternatives are limited," Alexa reminded her. "Your vessel is damaged beyond your capacity to repair. No rescue will reach this sector before your supplies are exhausted." The Carina Void was chosen precisely because it is overlooked by all major transit routes. The lights led Maxine to a circular chamber, dominated by a pool of what appeared to be liquid silver, similar to the substance that had sampled her DNA earlier. Hovering above the pool was a three-dimensional projection of a spiral structure that, twisted in impossible ways, branches splitting and rejoining in patterns that hurt her eyes. "This is the temporal helix before the usurper's attack," Valexa explained. "Each branch is a potential timeline, each intersection a decision point. My dynasty maintained the structure's integrity, ensuring all possibilities remained accessible." The projection shifted, the elegant spiral collapsing, branches severing into chaos. This is what happened when the usurper deployed his temporal weapons. The helix began to collapse, trapping all civilizations in a single fixed timeline. One where technological development stagnates, where humanity remains bound to primitive causality, where true potential is never realized. Maxine circled the projection, studying it with growing fascination, despite her skepticism. "And you believe you can fix this? Restore all these timelines with the right vessel at the convergence point, yes. The damage can be reversed, the helix reconstructed. But it requires someone with the genetic key, someone like you to access the temporal fulcrum before Maxine could respond." Alarms blared throughout the ship, red warning lights replacing the serene blue illumination. "Alert! Proximity warning! Unidentified vessel approaching." The ship's voice reverted to its earlier mechanical tone. A view screen activated, showing a sleek, predatory craft approaching the derelict. Its hull bore the unmistakable insignia of the Creditors' Alliance, the collection agency that held Maxine's crushing debt. "Well, that's just perfect," Maxine groaned. "How did they find me so quickly?" The mechanical voice gave way to Valex's smoother tones. "They were already in pursuit of your vessel. I detected their approach hours ago, but deemed it irrelevant to our discussion. They're debt collectors with judicial authorization to harvest organs for payment. I'd call that extremely relevant. Their concerns need not trouble us. This vessel has remained undetected for centuries. Its cloaking systems are beyond their technology." As if in direct contradiction to her words, the ship shuddered violently, throwing Maxine against the wall. "Grappling beam detected," reported the ship's mechanical voice. "Hull integrity compromised in sections 23 through 29. boarding party anticipated in 6 minutes. Impossible. Alexa's voiceover overlapped with the ship's. Their technology should not be capable of this. She paused, her voice now dubiously edged. Ah, I see. They possess temporal disruption technology. Crude, but effective against my ship's defenses. The usurper's legacy persists, it seems. Maxine pushed herself up, mind racing. I need weapons, defenses, anything. These aren't ordinary debt collectors. They're the elite recovery team. They don't leave witnesses. The ship's defensive systems are offline in the affected sectors, Valexa replied. However, there is another option. Accept the merger now, and I can guide you to weapons that respond only to Imperial DNA. Together, we can eliminate this threat, and then I'm stuck with you in my head forever. No thanks. There has to be another way. The ship trembled again as the boarding party began cutting through the outer hull. Damage reports scrolled across the view screens faster than Maxine could read them. Your time for deliberation has expired, Valexa stated coldly. Choose, now merger or abandonment. If you refuse, I will withdraw life support from all sections except the sanctuary chambers. You and your pursuers will perish together. Maxine's eyes narrowed. You're bluffing. This ship is your only connection to physical reality. If you kill everyone aboard, you'll be alone again, possibly forever. I have waited 789 years. I can wait longer if necessary. The lights dimmed ominously. Atmosphere venting will commence in 30 seconds. Wait. Maxine held up her hands. There has to be a compromise. What if we try a temporary merger? Just long enough to deal with the collectors, reach the convergence point, then we separate. I'll decide whether to help restore your helix. The light stabilized. Maxine considered the proposal. A temporary merger would be unprecedented. The Empress replied, the process was designed to be permanent. However, I may modify the transfer protocols for revocation. I need your word you won't override my control or permanently hijack my body. A sound like laughter echoed through the chamber. My dear, you speak as though we would be separate entities capable of deceiving one another. Once merged, such distinctions become fluid. But yes, I agree to your terms. The transfer will include a revocation protocol accessible to your consciousness. The ship shuddered again, more violently. Alert! Hull breach complete. Hostiles entering Section 28. We need to hurry. Maxine decided, approaching the silver pool. What do I do? The liquid silver began to rise, forming a humanoid shape that gradually took on the appearance of the Empress as she appeared in the recordings, regal, imposing, otherworldly. Enter the pool, instructed the liquid figure, its voice resonating directly in Maxine's mind. The merger is painless but transformative. Your perception of reality will expand beyond linear time. It may be disorienting at first. Taking a deep breath, Maxine stepped into the pool. The liquid silver flowed around her boots, up her legs, encasing her body in a cool metallic embrace that somehow felt both alien and familiar as it reached. Her neck panic flared briefly, a primal fear of drowning. But before she could react, the substance flowed into her mouth, her nose, her ears, and finally covered her eyes. Darkness. Then, everything. Maxine gasped as consciousness returned, but it wasn't just her consciousness anymore. Memories that weren't hers cascaded through her mind. Centuries of royal education, the weight of ruling a civilization that spanned time itself, the betrayal that had led to exile, the long, lonely vigil aboard the ship. Alongside these memories came knowledge, how to access the ship's systems, with a thought of how to perceive the subtle currents of temporal energy flowing through all matter, how to manipulate those currents to achieve effects that would seem like magic to her former self. "We are integrated," she said, her voice carrying dual tones, Maxine's practical inflection overlaid with Velexa's regal cadence. Fascinating. She examined her hands, which now bore intricate luminescent patterns beneath the skin. The physical manifestation of Velexa's temporal affinity merged with Maxine's biology. Her perceptions had expanded, allowing her to see not just the physical space around her, but the temporal echoes of what had been and glimpses of what might be. "The collectors have reached Section 30, she noted, perceiving their movements through the ship's senses. 6 individuals heavily armed with temporal disruption devices. They are following Maxine's biometric signature." With a gesture, she activated the ship's internal defenses, herding intruders to a section where temporal disruptors were ineffective. Another gesture summoned a weapon from a hidden compartment, a slender rod of iridescent material matching Velexa's robes in the recordings. "A chronoblade," she explained, sensing Maxine's curiosity. "It severs an object's connection to its timeline, erasing it. Moving with newfound grace and purpose, she made her way through the ship's corridors toward the intruders. Temporal perception allowed her to see their positions, even through walls, their forms leaving trails of probability in her vision. The first collector rounded a corner and immediately opened fire. With a casual wave of the chronolade, she sheared the energy blast from its trajectory, leaving it suspended in midair, frozen in time. "Impossible," the collector gasped, backing away. "Many things thought impossible become quite manageable with the proper perspective," she replied. Advancing, you pursued Maxine Reed for a debt of 26,000 credits. That debt is now settled. "By whose authority?" demanded the collector, raising his weapon again. She smiled, feeling both Maxine's satisfaction and Velexa's imperious disdain. "By the authority of the temporal dynasty, of course." With 5 precise movements of the chronoblade, she froze each collector in a separate temporal bubble, not killing them, but removing them from the normal flow of time. They would remain in stasis until she chose to release them. "Now," she said, returning to the ships. "Control center. Let us prepare for the convergence point." Settling into the command chair, she felt Velexa's algorithms activate, plotting a course through space and time towards a multi-dimensional destination. The ship hummed, ancient engines roaring like distant thunder. Stars shifted on the view screens as they accelerated, leaving the Carina void behind. Maxine felt herself transforming. Integrated with Velexa, their thoughts and perceptions blending, making their original agreement seem naive. How could they separate when the boundary blurred? Yet Maxine's skepticism countered Alexa's determination. Her perspective questioned the Empress's right to reshape reality. "The convergence point approaches," she announced. "Bridge temporal distortions, increasing helix reconstruction protocols, initiating view screens showing what no ordinary human could comprehend. A nexus where countless timelines converged into a single point of blinding intensity." The ship shuddered, navigating increasing gravitational and temporal forces. "Warning," the ship's voice reported. "Structural integrity compromised. All sections. Catastrophic failure imminent." "Irrelevant," she replied, standing from the command chair. "The vessel has served its purpose. Prepare the escape pod with helix reconstruction equipment." As she made her way to the pod, The ship began breaking apart around her, sections vanishing into temporal distortions, only to reappear moments later in different configurations. The very fabric of space-time was unraveling as they approached the convergence point. Within her mind, the merged consciousness of Maxine and Valexa began to fracture as well, their distinct perspectives reasserting themselves in the face of what they were about to attempt. "This will rewrite history," Maxine's voice. "Emerged separately. Everyone I've ever known might cease to exist, or exist differently. Only the true timeline will be overwritten. Valexa counted the true potential of humanity will be restored. Your limited perspective cannot grasp the necessity of this action." "Maybe not," Maxine admitted, "but I understand enough to know that forcing your vision on countless beings is exactly what your usurper did to you. Does becoming him break the cycle or perpetuate it?" The question hung between them as they reached the escape pod. A teardrop shaped the craft, constructed of the same iridescent material as the chronoblade, contained a single control panel surrounding a recessed area shaped like a human body, the Nexus Cradle. "From here," Alexa explained, "one with the Imperial bloodline can direct the temporal energies of the convergence point, reshaping the helix according to their will. Or," Maxine suggested, "according to both our wills, not a restoration of what was, but a creation of something new, something that preserves free will while opening the potential you value." The ship convulsed, violently, corridors twisting in impossible geometries as the temporal distortions intensified. "We have no time for philosophical debates," Valexa snapped. "The convergence point is destabilizing. We must act now, or lose the opportunity for another 1,000 years." "Then let's act together," Maxine insisted. "Not your way or mine, but something in between. A compromise that honors both our perspectives." As the merged consciousness settled into the Nexus Cradle, the escape pod detached from the disintegrating ship, accelerating toward the heart of the convergence point. Through the viewport, they could see the ancient vessel breaking apart, sections disappearing into the temporal maelstrom. 789 years of patience and planning reduced to scattered atoms across multiple timelines. The pod entered the convergence point, and reality itself seemed to dissolve around them. In this place beyond time, they perceived the collapsed helix in its entirety, a once magnificent structure, now broken and twisted, its countless branches withered or severed. Entirely, now they whispered in unison, reaching out with both physical hands and temporal perception to grasp the fragmented strands of possibility. In that moment of perfect clarity, the distinct consciousnesses of Maxine and Valexa reached an understanding, not a merger or a separation, but a synthesis, a new entity that honored both their experiences and perspectives. Together, they began the delicate work of reconstruction, not restoring the helix to its former state, but transforming it into something neither had envisioned. Alone, where Valexa would have created rigid structure, Maxine introduced flexibility, where Maxine would have allowed chaos. Provided elegant order together, they wove a new temporal helix, one that allowed for multiple potential futures, while maintaining enough stability to prevent collapse as the work neared completion. They became aware that their synthesized consciousness could not survive outside the convergence point. The energy required to reshape reality had consumed too much of their combined life force. A worthy end, they decided, watching as the new helix began to pulse with vitality, branches extending outward into infinity. With their final act, They programmed the pod to carry news of what had transpired back to inhabited space. A message in a bottle cast into the temporal sea, explaining how reality had been both preserved and transformed by the unlikely partnership of a desperate salvage specialist and an Empress who had waited 789 years for the right moment. As consciousness faded, they experienced a vision of a new timeline spreading outward, civilizations rising and falling, humanity exploring not just the physical universe, but the temporal one, each individual possessing the freedom to shape their path while participating in a greater whole. Not an ending, they whispered, as the pod carried their final message away from the convergence point, a convergence millennia in the centuries that followed. The pod would be discovered by countless civilizations across multiple timelines. Some would dismiss its contents as fantasy, others would build religions around it, and a few would understand the truth. Reality was saved not by empire restoration, but by a compromise between past and future, order and freedom. An Empress and a salvage specialist who met across 789 years. If this story sparked something inside you, don't let it fade. Like this story, if you believe in second chances. Share it if you believe someone else needs to hear it. Comment if you'd choose synthesis over control. Because sometimes the right timeline begins with one ripple from you.